guys, and welcome back to another video. Hopefully my voice doesn't sound too weird. We'll get a little bit into that later, but for today's sketchbook session, it is going to be on the shorter side, as well as it's probably going to be something more on the simple side, just because I didn't really have too much time, nor did I really have any ideas that I really wanted to crank out for like a sketchbook session, nor was I really itching to draw anything. So I kind of just picked something that we could draw today. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm showing you guys kind of my color swatches, as I already did my sketches prior to recording. So I wanted to just show mostly a little bit of like blocking in of some sort of color, as well as we're going to be mostly doing inking. So the color, actually let's talk about the character first. So I'm drawing Anaxa from Honkai Star Rail, and I feel like the lighter blue color fits his color palette a little bit better than my red lead or my kind of like more mid-tone blue kind of lead that I usually use. So because I didn't use something that's closer to mid-tone and the photo blue often just doesn't show up on camera, I decided to do that off camera so that we can just go ahead and jump in with just blocking in color and doing the inking. I'm still kind of like finagling with trying to get the lighting a little bit more consistent for traditional drawing. I feel like when I work on like digital for iPad or my tablet, I turn off a lot of my lights to prevent glare and just have like one main light to illuminate my hand as well as the desk. But when it comes to But with traditional art, I often find myself struggling a little bit to keep things looking more on the neutral side. Sometimes it's a little too yellow or it's too blue, and then I try my best to post-correct it later on while I'm editing. But here are the pens that we are going to be using. So I've used these in several videos in the past, especially when I was doing like little comics in my sketchbook. But I just like really enjoy using these, and kind of like the main reason why I even chose these particular markers or pens to draw with is that I knew at some point I am going to be needing to refill some sort of ink into these particular kind of like calligraphy pens. So on the back of these calligraphy pens, you can actually put the front cap onto the back and kind of like turn it counterclockwise to unscrew the cap to allow you to refill the little sponge on the inside to give you more ink. So I remember that I bought a different brush set that came with like a little ink refill bottle. I'm not too sure if this is just like normal Chinese calligraphy ink, but kind of like in the middle of me working on this particular spread, I end up trying to refill my pen so that we don't end up running too thin on the ink, because I was noticing that when I take long enough breaks in between, the pen does take a little bit of more back and forth to kind of get it started. So it's not as juicy as it was before, but it still has like quite a bit of ink, at least to what I could notice when I started to use it. But to kind of prevent it from drying out completely, I thought it would be more appropriate to just refill it when I feel like it's dry enough, which we will be doing that kind of in the middle of the footage. But kind of like the indicator that I overfilled it and slightly missed the barrel that kind of contains the little sponge for the reservoir of ink is that you're going to see a bunch of splotches or like drippage on top of my sketchbook. So please ignore that if you happen to see it a little bit later. So initially, because I was mainly focusing on using these calligraphy pens for inking, I did end up wanting to add a little bit of color to the page, like other than the pencil that I was initially sketching with. So because his color palette, it has like a bunch of different colors. We have like a dark teal, we have like a turquoise-ish, we have a lot of black, white, and gold as well, hints of red here and there. I just decided to pick a color that I feel like represents him pretty well as it can cover up some of my pencil marks, which happens to be this kind of pale mint green-ish color, which I think kind of works out well with the dark black, because I didn't want anything to compete too much, as I tend to like having my line art to have more contrast with either my sketch lines or with the colors. It just kind of depends on the vibe that I want for the entire sketch page or like for the spread. So 2 reasons I might sound a little bit different today is that 1, I got back from like my friend's bachelorette party. I don't know if it's because where we traveled to, or I just really do suck whenever I leave the house and stuff, that I tend to get sick either from like change of temperature, or I'm wearing like not the correct clothing. So like if it's too hot, I often wear like long sleeves, so maybe it's just too hot for my body, and I often for some reason just happen to get sick. So I think I'm still congested. So that's one main reason. But I was trying to make sure I wasn't going to sound congested when I was doing the voiceover. But I tried my best to just like wait it out a little bit and let the medicine kick in. And I thought I got to a good place. But my mistake was actually just refreshing my YouTube homepage. And there was a recommended video of, I think Niji En made a little project, or I guess like Millie made a project for Fulgur because he's graduating tomorrow. I guess like when this video comes out, it'll be today. So I watched it and I was like not expecting to cry because I didn't really know what the video was going to be. So I ended up like ugly crying, and now I feel like my face is just, everything feels stuffy now. So yeah, my mistake. But if you are a fan of any of the livers from Niji En, or specifically like Fulgur, I would highly recommend watching that video because it's cute, but it's also like sad and beautiful. I don't know, it's something just really struck a chord in me. But I'm not sure if I've actually talked about this on this channel, but I think like growing up, I wasn't really a kid who really cried as much, like let's say up until I was like 12. Maybe like if I fell and like scraped my knee and stuff, maybe I'd cry because it hurt. But otherwise, watching like any type of media or like talking to other people or like witnessing stuff, I didn't really cry. I don't know if it's like me suppressing, like not wanting to show my feelings because I was a very shy kid growing up. Well, I guess I'm still very shy, so that's not going to really change. But after like going to like middle school, high school, uni, I am definitely like a crier for the most part, or at least like if I'm watching somebody really sad, I will get sad. If it's something really happy, like happy tears, I will also cry. So I don't know, maybe it's just I cry easily technically. I should have known that for myself, and I shouldn't have watched that video before doing this, so I do apologize if I sound different or like you can tell that I'm congested right now. But let's go ahead and jump back into talking about the drawings again. So at this point, I have finished inking more or less the first drawing, and we're moving on with the second drawing. So at this point, you can kind of see the little splotches in my sketchbook, which means that I have at this point refilled my pen, or at least attempted to refill it. But I did notice that the pen was dispensing a lot more ink, which made my extra fine feel more like a fine or a medium tip. So I decided to see if I could really use more of the ink right off the bat by scribbling to see if I could thin it out a little bit, because it was definitely kind of pooling at the end of our tip here. And I think I talked about these pens in the past. So they have like a nib that's both like firm and still like a little bit flexible. I believe it's kind of more like a plastic tip. It's not too similar to a fine liner, but I like these a little bit better just because even though it's kind of more of that cone shape, I can still get really thin lines, especially if I go with more like quicker strokes, especially when I'm doing like a little bit of texture for the hair, for like a band of shadow or anything like that, hatching. I can typically get some like, if I can with like the extra fine, get more like hairline thinness for the strokes. Otherwise, like if you press a little bit harder, you can get thicker lines, lean it on its side, and you can get even wider lines than what you could initially do if you just thinly use the tip of it. So I definitely prefer these over fine liners. I also think that these are kind of a happy medium between using like a full-on squishier, softer brush tip kind of pen, similar to like the Pentel Pocket brush pen. That one has like very like much of a thinner, delicate, kind of like squishier type of nib, rather than, or I guess it's not really squishy, it has like individual hairs, so like the structure of it's not as stiff compared to the one that I'm currently using, which has more like that plastic body. But this particular set comes with like an extra fine, a fine, and a medium, which kind of has that kind of like conical shape that's with the plastic nib, or at least I think it's plastic. And then I think it comes with 4 other markers, and they're labeled as brush, and it kind of has that synthetic felt like brush tip. So it's not quite the same as like the Pentel Pocket brush pen. I would say it's like similar to like other markers, like alcohol marker tips, where it's like a little bit squishy, has some give, but for the most part it still has like its own structure, so it's not too flexible, I guess, or like not too soft. Like it will still retain its shape after you lift it up from the paper, so it's kind of just nice to use if you quickly want to fill in areas or any flat blacks or anything in your sketchbook, or inkings, anything like that. Because I didn't really know the direction for the sketch page to go into, I didn't really think about like the layout as much. So we're gonna have like a weird awkward gap right in the middle, and oftentimes I do struggle filling in some of the spaces, especially as we get closer and closer to the middle of the sketchbook, just because it's a little bit hard to not want to accidentally like cut off the face or like maybe cut off the body, because you do have to go over that center seam line or like where the binding is, which sometimes makes things look a little derpy or awkward or just like harder to draw on because it's an uneven surface. So I try my best to not like place a face directly in the middle, which is probably why I avoided that section for now, and we'll probably just add text instead of adding another figure at some point. But while I was inking the second one of Anaxa, I did notice that the more I did scribbling and the more lines that I did throughout the piece, I think the marker kind of returned back to normal. So it definitely has enough ink for a little longer, which is great. And I can definitely use the ink that I bought, that I did use to refill this pen, to refill the other ones. I just make sure not to refill them too much, especially for the fine and the medium, so that we can still get our sharp points, because that's kind of like the reason why I really like these particular pens. I don't really have to like worry too much about having super light pressure in order to achieve super light lines, compared to like anything that has more of like natural hair or like individual hair for like the end or like the tip of the brush. So to kind of finish off the spread, like I mentioned earlier, I will be putting just a little bit of text to fill up in the center. So I didn't really like how light Anaxa's name was going to be, so I will just kind of like outline with the, I think this is the medium size of the calligraphy pens, and I'm just like offsetting it a little bit so it looks like the light mint color is like a drop shadow or something like that, so that we're not covering it completely, nor does it look like I'm trying to trace the letters exactly. And then to fill up and to clean up this spread a little bit more from my splotches, I decided to add 2 little squares to show off our, I guess, color swatches in this case. I don't do these too often, but I thought it would be a good way to get rid of the biggest splotch on my spread. So I think that's it for today's little drawing session. I do know that this one's much shorter than usual, but I don't think like there was really anything too exciting going on here, so I didn't really want to extend too much of the footage. Oh, by the way, this is the ink that I decided to get with, I think it came with a different set of pens, but I used it to refill my calligraphy pens. And so far, I think it's like similar-ish ink. It works with my alcohol markers, so it works out for at least what I will be using it for the future. Yeah, I am definitely sleep deprived right now, so I will talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!